Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dino. You know, for the last couple years, I've been getting questions about my shed and how I have it set up and could I do a tour of the shed. Well, today's that day. It's a cold mid-January day. There's no snow, there's nothing else to do. So I thought, let's have a look at how I have my shop laid out and maybe I can pass on a couple tips that I've found useful over the years setting up a small workshop like this to work on power sports. So why don't you sit back, grab yourself something warm to drink, and enjoy Dino's Tinker Shed. I'll see you inside. It's a little bit chilly. So this is my shed, the Tinker Shed here, and I've had this shed probably about 10 years now, I guess. Originally, when my wife and I bought this house back in 2001, I think, it's the only house we ever bought. We don't plan on moving. We really like the neighborhood here. It had a small Dutch barn type shed, similar to the look of the Tinker Shed here, but much, much smaller. It was only a 12 by 8 shed, and because the knee walls were only 4.5 feet high, everything was kind of condensed in the center, and you walked around like this all the time. What really spurred me to get a bigger shed like this one, which is 12 feet by 20 feet with 7.5 foot walls, was really the sport of snowmobiling. My son-in-law and I had been snowmobiling for a while before I bought this, and we were storing both of our sleds in a tent just sort of out to the side of our deck here for a lot of years. We had a plywood floor, and it was, I think, a 10 by 10 tent that we would roll them in for the summer and in the winter months when we weren't riding them. And I decided at some point that maybe we should build a shed to store both sleds in and work on them. And that's what I did when we bought this shed here. Now the shed itself is a floating shed. It's actually on what they call mud sills. So basically it has 2x4s that run all along the bottom, and it is sitting on patio stones that I prepared with a screenings base. Leveled it all, put the patio stones down, and then basically this shed just sits on that floating pad. The nice thing about the area where I live here is the soil is pretty much sand. There's no rocks in it, there's no clay, and I don't get a lot of frost heave. So the shed's been here for 10 years and it hasn't really moved at all. It's been really, really good. Now, when Suzette and I started looking for sheds seriously, we went to where everybody goes. We went to the big box stores, we went to Lowe's, and we went to Home Depot. What we found were the sheds that they sold were really lacking in quality. Even a shed this size, a 12 by 20, you can purchase at Lowe's. But when you really look into it, the walls are made out of 2x3 lumber and they're on 24-inch centers. And all of the sheet material that they use is oriented strand board. And the siding that they used really was usually vinyl or something kind of cheap. So that led us to look elsewhere other than big box stores. And we're glad we did, because we ended up at Cornerstone Mini Barns in Niagara here. And they're fantastic. They came right out to our house, looked at the area that we wanted to put it in, and then made suggestions on different styles, options such as wall heights, even color choices. There's over 23 different colors that they'll provide that they paint the shed. It's a custom build specifically for you. But what we really liked was the fact that the walls are made out of 2x4s on 16-inch centers. All the joists for the second floor are 2x6s, and all of the sheet goods are 3/4-inch tongue and groove plywood, not oriented strand board. And you can see it's a good looking shed. It came with all of the window boxes and the window treatments, and they were so fantastic to come out here and so friendly to deal with. We're not being sponsored by them in any way, but if you're looking for a shed in the Niagara region, Cornerstone Mini Barn Sheds are the place I would go to look. When I actually had this shed built, there was really no expectation to be out here filming YouTube videos like this, any kind of tutorials. That came much, much later. Originally, it was built again to store snowmobiles and all of our gardening tools and my mechanics tools, which I had pretty much stuffed down in my wood shop for years. It was a really fun project because you were able to lay everything out brand new. There was nothing in here. It was just an empty shell. And for a lot of years, it wasn't even insulated. In fact, it wasn't until 2002 that my wife and I took everything down and re-insulated all the walls. So it really is a very functional space. Again, it's 12 feet wide by 20 feet long with 7.5-foot ceiling, so it's really got lots of height. And it does have a loft upstairs that we store tools and stuff that we don't use too often, like our fall furniture or our summer furniture we put up there for the winter. And I also house my air compressor on the second floor so it doesn't take up valuable floor space down here. As time went by, of course, we started to accumulate more and more things. That's what sort of happens. I've had to lay the shop out in a manner that gives me the maximum amount of floor space that I can get so that I can still roll a snowmobile in here or my DR650 and actually work on it. And that is probably the first key fundamental for anybody who's setting up a small shop like this is space management. For many, many small shop owners like myself, the biggest challenge that you're going to face is space management. Figuring out where to place workbenches or rolling cabinets and how to free up as much floor space as possible. The floor is really where most of my projects take place, either on my snowmobile, motorcycles, or lawn tractors. When Carl actually bought a used Honda mower, we brought it in here, ripped it all apart, and had enough floor space to actually work around it. The key to good space management, in my opinion anyway, is getting as many things off of the floor and up onto either shelves like this or some kind of racking system like you see here for all of our gardening tools. Now these racks are adjustable and they're fairly heavy duty, so you can sort of mix and match over time as your needs change. And I just use simple 1/2-inch plywood shelving. I don't buy anything fancy. I use what's practical. And I also fasten them on here with screws so they don't move around. Shelves are probably the biggest weapon you have in your arsenal for keeping organized. I do have some cupboards as well to hide some things in here, but most of the time I have everything on open shelves. Here you can see the style of bracket that I use to hold up these lightweight shelves. Now you can go to a big retailer like Walmart or here Canadian Tire and you can buy these. They're usually 2 for $8. Or you can do what I do and go to the dollar store and buy 2 for $2. And they're the exact same shelving bracket. I've looked all the time and compared them and they're the same thing. So don't hesitate to go and look in some of these places like Dollar Store or Dollarama or Dollar General, I guess in the States, and look for things that are sort of easy to produce. You don't get any more value by spending more money at a big box store. These have worked fine for me for 10 years. I've been using this style of bracket, and people will say they're not strong enough. Well, this is my scrap metal box that I keep all my offcuts of metal in, and it just sits up on that shelf and never moves. So they're a good value. I think a really good example of using shelving wisely is where I have all of my sockets laid out here. I have my 1/4-inch and 3/8 drive sockets all in trays, both metric and imperial, up on the next shelf here. And then on this end, I have all my 1/2-inch drive material, and in between I have things like Allen keys or Torx wrenches and things like that. A lot of people place these into a drawer. They just throw them into a drawer. They become a mix mash. You're looking for stuff all the time. When you put them into trays and have them out like this, you can actually see if you're missing a socket, and then you can look around and put it back in. Now, if you would talk to my friend Carl, he'll tell you that I'm a bit weird in the fact that I'm always putting the sockets back, even in between job tasks. So I'll use my 10mm socket, take a couple bolts off, and then I'll put it back on the tray. It's a little bit obsessive compulsive. What I find though is in a small shop like this, it's easy to lose things because there's not a lot of space. You get rags on the floor, all kinds of stuff. By putting stuff back in the tray after each process in the overall operation of a repair, you know exactly where your tools are. And I've had this 10mm socket for 10 years. I've never had to replace it, which is, if everybody knows, the 10mm always disappear. This is the bench that I typically do electrical repairs or finer work on. It's got a much brighter lighting surface for my old tired eyes, but I have all of the electrical testing equipment that I need either inside of this bench or on the pegboard in behind me. I have a wire loom here that allows me to get any kind of wire that I need, and I can get that stocked up as well. Up in here, I have an assortment of extra wire. When it comes on sale, I just buy it and stock up on it. I have my soldering station, and then all the wire strippers and things like that that I need. And to make my life easier, I actually have side cutters, strippers, and crimpers all on magnetic rails here that I can just pull off when I need them and then put them back. I have other side cutters in my more machinist toolbox on the other side that I use for most things. But I do find that having duplicates like this makes your life a lot easier. I also keep all my drill bits on this side, so my drill sits on this side and my impact guns sit over on my wet bench on the other side. If you're to roll through the toolbox, you're going to see that all of my testing equipment is in this toolbox, and it's laid out in small dollar store containers that I hot glue to the bottom. And you kind of see I've got drawers for drill bits. I have a drawer specifically for abrasives. I have drawers on this side over here with different fasteners, whether they're metric in one, imperial in the next drawer, and then oversized fasteners and band clamps in below that. The bottom drawers contain other tools, either corded tools or grinders, things like that, that take up a lot of space. And then on this side, I have some more testing equipment over here, things like compression testers and the such. The other thing that I use this bench for is filming, and that's what you'll see sometimes, these 3/4 inch pipe standoffs that I'll use to clamp either cameras or microphones to, and they're fastened throughout the shed. In this side over here, I do keep a lot of different camera equipment that I'll use throughout production of Dino's Tinker Shed. Things like microphones, colored gels for lenses, for lights, things like that. But I also have fuel line up here, some wire loom, just odds and ends that everybody accumulates. Over here is what I call my wet bench. And this is a very heavy duty wood framed bench that I built really early on when the shop was brand new. It's built out of 2x4s, but most of the time, like this front rail here, it's actually doubled up. So it's actually a 4x4. And the top of it is full 2x-dimensional lumber with a rubber cover on it. Now I use this area mostly for things like rebuilding wheel bearings or when I'm cleaning stuff. The rubber helps protect the bench, and it's really sturdy. So if you have to hammer on stuff with one of these hammers that I have here, it works really good. Now I chose to use pegboard here again because I like to see the different tools that I have to make sure they're in place, and it helps me organize things. So all my hammers and files are up here, my torque wrenches, and any kind of ratchet style or socket style equipment is either in my tool bench here, or like this, I have this electric ratchet that I keep handy just hanging on the pegboard. A big challenge for me was some of these larger ratchets that I have. I've got a lot of them and they don't fit very well inside this rolling cabinet. The solution that I found was to go over to my local hardware store and find this little rack here that's designed to hold brooms and shovels, small handled tools like that. The ratchets actually fit in really well. They pop in and out like this big breaker bar. There we go. And it keeps them organized, visible, and out of my toolbox. Another little tip is all of my magnetic trays, well, they just stick on the side of this toolbox so they're easy to get to and I can see where they are. I also have my impact gun and all the different impact attachments, so quarter drive, half drive, 3/8 drive, all on magnets over here in the corner. I also have an assortment of screwdrivers. Now these are not the JIS screwdrivers that I use on my DR650. Those sit over on the electrical side. But these are just very good quality Klein tools that fit fasteners very, very well. And I use a lot. It gives me different options over here. Underneath, again, I use slide out bins that I buy at the dollar store for like $2.25. Here's all of my zip ties, so I've got an assortment of them. And they sort of slide in and out on this shelf, very much like a drawer. The advantage is I can put it up on the bench to see what's in it. In this case, this is all RV supplies, extra trailer lights, plugs, things like that. Now, there are better options, I'm sure, but this does work for me. These toolboxes and shelves here are pretty much mechanical tools. Things like ratchets and wrenches and things such as that. The small one on top keeps some quarter drive hardware, all of my extensions here for the different size sockets. And then as I move down, I have things like picks and coal chisels in this drawer. The large cabinet is laid out pretty effectively, and I try to do the same thought process inside these cabinets as I do out in the shop itself. So I use a lot of shelving out here. Inside of this drawer, I use organizers for all of the pliers. So they're there, you can see them, you know exactly what's missing and what's actually in place. So I have things like Allen keys, your typical stuff that people have, but even my ratcheting wrenches here, they sit in trays. It just makes it so much easier when you're trying to find things in the middle of a project when you know exactly where they're going to be. For my bench grinder, I have a small 6-inch variable speed bench grinder here because I have a brass wheel on one side and a fairly fine wheel on the other. And for the brass wheel, I like to run it a little bit slower so it doesn't sling wire at you as it's working. Now I don't have it mounted on a bench. I have it mounted on some heavy duty shelf brackets here right against the actual building. It's fastened right to the walls. This saves space, but it's also, I like it better than a pedestal because I can sweep underneath it when I want to, and I just put a bucket under here for scrap pieces of metal. It seems to work really well for me. It was really, really inexpensive to do. And eventually I'm going to follow Carl's lead and put a piece of plexiglass off the shelf up above it so I can get rid of this. It'll provide better protection and stay cleaner than these little guards. Anyway, it's a really great little spot for it. And speaking of walls, when my wife and I decided to actually insulate the shed, we took all of the corkboard or pegboard off, stripped everything back down to the wooden studs, and when we finally got it insulated, we put 1/4-inch hardboard on the walls instead of drywall. I've had some experience with drywall in garage situations. Moisture really impacts it, and it's not very dent resistant, where this stuff, you can hit that with a hammer and you know, it's probably going to survive, whereas drywall, It just doesn't. You end up with dents that you're constantly filling and painting, the seams split and crack. And I like the look of the brown, I'll be honest with you. It sort of looks just like the walls. For us, it worked really good. We've only had it up here probably about 8 months, but I really do like it. Eventually, I have to get the attic insulated. I was planning on doing that in the summer, and I really wanted to spray foam it. I wanted to put closed cell spray foam up there. And I called all over throughout the summer at different times, trying to get a reasonably good price. Most companies wanted $1,900 to insulate just the roof on this shed. So I have to figure out if I'm going to use rigid foam up there or maybe go with battens again like I did in the walls here. I just haven't fully decided, and that's one of the reasons it's taken me so long to do a video like this, is I wanted to kind of have everything done, but I just haven't had the time. The other option would be to just insulate the ceiling above me here, maybe put a drop ceiling in. But I tuck stuff up into those joists, and I don't want to lose that headroom. So I really want the insulation to be up above in the loft itself. Over in this far corner is where I actually have power coming in. So my shed has 60 amp service to it, which allows me to run a 220 welder if I ever get the opportunity to own one. And it's all really easily laid out. I have a big enough panel here that I can run every single circuit, every plug on a different circuit here, which means you can run multiple tools plugged in and not worry about blowing the breaker. You'll see I have one switch right here, and this actually controls the air compressor upstairs. You'll hear it when I flip the switch. Again, I moved the air compressor upstairs partly to keep it a little bit quieter, but more or less to keep it off of the floor down here. It's plumbed down through hoses to this hose reel, and I have a small sort of container that's tucked in here that houses things like, well, I've got some grease gun attachments and, you know, a few other things in there that make a lot of sense. It's tidy, it's easy to roll up out of the way when you're done with it, and I like the fact that I can remotely shut off the compressor from down here, so it's not always running. It's on demand as I need it. Underneath this window, I mounted a device that Carl gave me. And this is really just all of the most common fluids that I use sit inside of this tray, and the spray tips sit right here. So you actually end up accumulating those straws instead of losing them normally. This is a really great little addition, and these are usually around $20 on Amazon or Princess Auto or Harbor Freight, something like that. Next to my electrical bench, I have this small 12-ton press. And I've said this in other videos, is you don't normally need a press in a small shop like this, but if you have room to sneak one in, they're a really nice tool to have. When you need to press out bearings or maybe bend some metal, this thing works way better than a bench vise. It's got much more power, it's much more predictable, and you tend to have more space in here than most vices would provide. Now I have this one tucked up fairly close to the wall, and I actually have it built on a pedestal to get it up to a nice working height for me. If it was on the ground, this would probably be about here, and I just can't have that. I'm just too tall for that. But it does work well. I'd love to have air assist on this, but some of the things that speed the process up is if you make yourself a small short handle like this, it's much faster to move the jack itself up or down. And then I built this little small tool here, I don't know if you can see that or not, that I use to release the pressure and open and close it, so I don't have to always take the handle out. It works really well. Maybe I'll do a little short video on how to make one of these because they're really, really handy. You can see with this DR650 sitting here that 12 feet really does give you a lot of space. And intentionally, I've kept this wall pretty clean because this is where I push my snowmobile up in the summer to give me the maximum amount of room. The nice thing is I've got the DR650 on wheels here, and it's straight up and down. I can move this around the shop when I want to, either to work on it or to get it out of the way like it is now so I can film everything here. Well, I really do hope you enjoyed today's tour of my shed here. It really was fun going back and looking over some of the memories that have happened in here over the last 10 years. If you really did enjoy it, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It really does help me to understand what people want to watch. And we're almost at 3,000 subscribers, and I can't wait to get there. The other thing it does is it does help YouTube to determine what other people want to watch, and maybe it'll recommend it to them. So until then, I'm Dino. You have yourself a great day, and I hope to see you soon here on Dino's Tinker Shed. Now I've got to go put everything back because I got to get onto that DR650. I need to pull that rear end out of it. I'll see you soon. Bye.